So I know, taking a look at me, the first thing one might think is, yes, I know this man. I know his story, obviously. Midwestern, corn-fed, football, probably did the whole thing, got injured, couldn't go all the way, came out to LA to chase his dreams. I know this man, I know his story. But that's incorrect. I was raised by parents who work as liaisons in international countries for outside and foreign agencies visiting. So I grew up in Southeast Asia, looking like a life version of Mikey from television's Recess. So one of the places that I grew up was Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and Phnom Penh, or Cambodia rather, is the home of the one of the seven wonders of the ancient world, Angkor Wat. And if you aren't familiar with Angkor Wat, it's a sprawling temple ground. It's absolutely stunning. You might be familiar with it because it was prominently featured in Angelina Jolie's Tomb Raider, and she spends some time there getting very sweaty and bouncy. So if that reminds you of it, that's where it is. So we were living in Cambodia, and we had the opportunity to go visit some friends of ours who lived in that portion of the country, some missionary friends of ours, and we were going to go visit them. And while we were up there, Angkor Wat's give or take about 7 hours from Phnom Penh, and while we were up there, we were going to go visit Angkor Wat. Now, like any 8-year-old, I desperately wanted to be an archaeologist because I loved history and I loved whips, Indiana Jones. I wanted to be Indiana Jones. So I was very excited about this prospect of going to Angkor Wat. So Angkor Wat is kind of way out in the boondocks. You've got to really drive off the beaten path to get there. And once we get out there, it's really sprawling. So there's areas that are heavily trafficked, but then there are areas that are a little less. You can kind of get secluded in them and explore them, and they're more overgrown by jungle and whatnot. So I kind of get ahead of my family and the rest of our group, and I'm exploring this area, and I am in full Indiana Jones mode, like as Indiana Jones as a sweaty Mikey from Recess could be, and I'm just trying to be dashing, and I'm like pulling vines aside and like rubbing my hands along the wall to make sure there's no like darts shooting out or anything. And as I kind of round this corner, and as I round this corner, one of these walls, I'm sort of secluded, one of these walls has this, there's these carvings all over the place, these beautiful carvings of armies or processions or parades or whatever the case might be. And I'm running my hand on this wall, and one of the bricks like loosens slightly. And no doors open up, like don't get crazy. Like I'm not actually Indiana Jones. But it just like, it loosens slightly, and I noticed that there is a brick that is like kind of ajar. And it's like the brick happens to be like a portion of a face, and I'm like, this is like a pretty key brick in this mural. And I like give it a little loosen, and it just like comes right out of the wall. And I'm like, history. This belongs in a museum. Like I'm like, yes. And I kind of look around, and I throw it in my backpack, and I go on my day. And I'm like, I have a piece of history in my backpack. Pretty dope for an 8-year-old. And the day goes on, everything's fine, we're hanging out. On the way home, me and my buddy Josh, who is the son of the family we were visiting, we're chilling in the back of the truck. We're like in the back of a pickup truck, because we were 8 years old in Southeast Asia. Like, life was amazing. And we're riding in the back of the pickup truck, and I reach into my backpack, and I'm like, hey, check this out. And I like pull out this small piece of brick with this carving on it. And I'm like, pretty sweet, right? Like I found this at the place. And he just like, his eyes just like flood with Christian missionary guilt. And he's just like, oh man, dude, if you get caught with that, that's like super illegal. Like you can't take anything from Angkor Wat. It's like a protected thing. And so I'm like, what? No, I didn't even gather. And like, he's like, you gotta get rid of that immediately. And we're driving by these rice paddies, and he's like, seriously, just ditch it, dude, just ditch it. And so I'm just like, bah, and I just throw it out, I'd throw it away, like throw it into a rice paddy. And I think everything's fine. Gotten away with everything. Forward a little bit, sometime probably about a month or so, we are in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and sidebar, Phnom Penh underwent a military coup, which basically happened because the prince, the ruling party of Phnom Penh and of Cambodia, he decided to leave the country, and one of his generals was like a bar patron just waiting for a bar stool to open up, just like, mine now, like immediately just like dove on it. So in a matter of an afternoon, the city was just plunged into anarchistic, is that the word? Anarchy. Just plunged into anarchy, and there are tanks, they are shelling villages. Phnom Penh is being shelled. The day it starts, I remember we start hearing like blasts are kind of out and they're moving closer. And I remember like our dogs are like howling and barking and freaking out. My dad grabs me, throws me under a table, and like crawls under there with me. Dust is shaking off of the roof, and he's like, I'm like, Dad, why are the dogs freaking out? And he's like, well, you see, son, we can only hear when the artillery actually hits, but the dogs can hear the artillery whistling through the air. And I was like, I am 8 years old. Thank you. And he's like, it's gonna be fine. We're gonna get military evac'd out. The embassy has contacted all of the Americans in the region. They're getting us out as fast as we can. We're under house arrest for about 2 days. They round us all up. They throw us on some armored buses. They drive us to the airport. And as we're waiting at the airport, we see our plane, we're getting on it. My dad gets a call from the agency that employs him, and they're like, look, we can't have absolutely everybody leave. Somebody has to stay to protect certain professional interests in the country. You gotta stay. You're our guy. Please hang out in this burning husk of a nation. And so my dad's like, cool, I'll chill. Family, get on the plane, and we fly out. We fly out to Bangkok, Thailand. And a couple weeks go by, we're in Bangkok, we call my dad, dad's on speakerphone, and I remember listening to him and my mom talking, and my dad's like, everything's fine, everything's cool, the fighting has calmed down, the general has seized control, hooray, like everything's good, there's no more fighting. We're actually having our first foreign team come in this coming week, and I'm gonna be their liaison up north. And my mom's like, oh, okay, good, what are they coming for? And they're like, my dad goes, it's really kind of crazy. They wanna go up to the Angkor region. They think that some of the shelling in one of the villages around there unearthed some old stones in a region that nobody had excavated previously. And so they found a brick reminiscent of the Angkor temples in a region where there are no Angkor temples. So they're gonna come check it out. And they found nothing. But I like to imagine that to this day, there is some archaeologist somewhere whose entire life obsession is finding the lost portion of Angkor. Thank you guys very much.